Poltergeist, 40 Years Later. Written by Andrew Grievous and read by Dean Delp. Ask any horror fan, journalist, or scholar, and there are a few undeniable classics within the genre, regardless of the time period. One of those undeniable classics is 1982's Poltergeist, a film that first scared audiences in theaters and then scared them for decades after, with tales of the alleged curse on the film. With Poltergeist recently celebrating its 40th anniversary, this felt like a perfect time to revisit the film and see how well it's living up to its legendary status. More than a ghost story. What truly makes Poltergeist a terrifying film is that it scares the audience on two primal levels: a child abduction and paranormal activity in one's own home. Jo Beth Williams and Craig T. Nelson as the parents lend the film a certain credibility with their strength of acting. You feel their fear and vulnerability. Their youngest daughter is missing, and you can relate to their feelings. You're able to project yourself into that situation. You know you're so close to her, you can hear her, but because it's paranormal in nature, you don't know how to react. You don't know what the next move to make is, or what reaction you might get based on what you do next. Great acting wasn't the only reason we were so easily able to invest in this family and their terrifying predicament. Director Tobe Hooper and co-writer-producer Steven Spielberg wisely gave us an adequate amount of time to care about the Freeling family before we got into the action. The film opens with a hook that youngest daughter Carol Ann is being drawn to the static in the TV, but it's merely a hook. Then we get world building. We get time invested in this family so we can emotionally care about and identify with them. The pacing of a horror film can be everything. The best films make us care before they make us scared, and that's exactly what Poltergeist did here. After the initial hook, we move into a very Spielbergish opening where suburbia is fetishized to some extent, with the kids playing with the remote control cars on a no-outlet street, and beautiful overhead shots paint the picture of a serene existence. Everything looks perfect. People look happy. We as the audience are lulled into this false sense of security that this neighborhood is idealistic, which is in direct opposition to director Tobe Hooper's more socially conscious work. That difference in style and vision between Hooper and Spielberg has become the subject of much larger debates, but on an artistic level it works. It adds to the terror. Spielberg's vision pulls our guard down, and then Hooper scares the hell out of us. We'll never know the truth of who actually directed a majority of the film and who should get what credit for Poltergeist, but we do know that the end result is a masterpiece, and both men's styles are well represented. The social commentary of Poltergeist. The social commentary in Poltergeist has been well documented and analyzed over the years. We pay for greed. Watching the film in 2022, this social commentary took on a new meaning, or perhaps a better way of phrasing it is that it spotlighted a lot of issues that we would still be discussing 40 years later. The brilliance of the film's commentary is that adding a moral to the story doesn't diminish the horror of the film. The evil itself doesn't have an explanation. Rather, the evil already existed, and human action gave it an opening. Hooper and Spielberg towed this line masterfully, as nothing can reduce the impact of a horror film more than over-explanation. Here, they avoided that pitfall and layered the narrative at the same time by pointing the finger back at the action of the people for allowing this to happen in the story and giving us something additional to think about in the real world. Horror always feels most impactful when there's an element of reality, and the repercussions of human greed are certainly relatable. Pulling off social commentary isn't easy. More often than not, it feels like a message is being pounded into your head, but here it wasn't. The legacy of Poltergeist. In recent years, a lot of the focus of Poltergeist has been on the tragic deaths of Heather O'Rourke and Dominique Dunne, two actresses that played the Freeling sisters, as well as the reported conflicts between Tobe Hooper and Steven Spielberg. This is understandable to a certain degree, but I would also argue that it takes away from how good this film truly is. The film is a masterpiece in telling a layered story with top-notch acting and direction. It's emotional, terrifying, and makes you think after the credits roll. it holds up, the special effects included. It's mostly a less is more type of film, allowing our imagination to do the heavy lifting. But when it's time to pull out the big guns, the supernatural foes are shown in a manner that does not pull us out of the story. Poltergeist plays on many genuine human fears, and doesn't call us to suspend our disbelief much at all. That's a testament to a great horror film. The film is truly a blending of different types of cinema. Hooper's versus Spielberg's direction of blissful suburban landscape and imagination-inducing adventures. And they mesh really well, leaving the audience unbalanced at times, but in a good way. It's art, make no mistake about it. 40 years after the release of Poltergeist, I think it's important to separate the off-screen tragedies and rumors from the film itself. It's not my place or desire to comment on the so-called curse. 2 young women dying far too early that happen to be in the same legendary film is a tragedy. I would rather honor their legacies by acknowledging their work in one of the best horror films of all time, than try to apply cause to murder and misdiagnosis. As for the film itself, Poltergeist occupies a spot on the hypothetical Mount Rushmore of horror. It sets the standard for films that would follow in its footsteps, such as the Paranormal Activity series, the Conjuring franchise, and many more. 40 years later, the film holds up remarkably well, which is a feat in itself, considering all of the advancement of the last 40 years, cementing its place as an all-time classic horror film.